Hello, welcome to the Theology Pugcast. We are making some shows here at the end of the year as we count down to Christmas. And I think the show will be out before then. But welcome. I'm C.R. Wiley. I'm a pastor and I serve a church just outside Portland, Oregon. And I am a senior editor at Touchstone Magazine. Glenn, how about you?
Glenn Sunshine, retired history professor, Renaissance and Reformation Europe. Senior fellow, Colson Center for Christian Worldview, my own ministry, Every Square Inch Ministries, eSquareInch.org, writing on Substack, working on another book, all kinds of things.
Okay, good. Well, Tom, introduce yourself and take us right into the subject of the day.
Okay, I'm Tom Price. I teach theology and Christian ethics at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. I also serve a church in Plainville, Connecticut. And the topic of the day is something that is akin to themes we've been addressing lately and with a bit of focus and depth. But one of the reasons for such a focus is this stuff is impacting things everywhere. And the kinds of moral questions in particular, but also kind of spiritual and social questions that they kind of bring right before us, requires some, I think, Christian engagement. And we're not the only ones doing it, but we are, like others, trying to do it with a certain, soberness and reflection. And so the topic of today really has to deal with AI chatbots and mental health, especially among teenagers.
Right.
I was scrolling one day through the conversation some theologians were having on X, and the British theologian John Milbank had posted a Guardian article called "I Feel It's a Friend." A quarter of teenagers turn to AI chatbots for mental health support. And he wrote in reply, the church needs to step into this terrible situation fast and in an organized way. And I think the real sobering, issue here is that this is 40% of teenagers, 13 to 17 years old in UK and Wales. And
so this is all kids that between those ages who are using chatbots in this way. We're not talking about necessarily just kids who have been diagnosed with some mental health problem.
That's right. Right. And so they're consulting AI, and then there are a whole lot of kind of reasons, that the kids give for why they're turning here, and they may be a good way into the topic, but I don't want to lose sight of Milbank's point that the church needs to step into this terrible situation and in an organized way, not just one person addressing it here and there.
Have we done anything in an organized way ever?
I still admire the
optimism.
He's already quite up there, so I'm glad he still has hope there. But one of the things I think, and it's another issue, kind of subtopic I do want to get to today, but one is it appears to be a friend for kids who are lonely, and not just lonely, but troubled. They're troubled lives. And I think one of the things you'll see, if you have a chance, maybe we can put the article, I can find the link in the show notes.
So this is in the Guardian?
Yes, in the Guardian. Okay. Yeah. And one of the things you'll see is that the kids interviewed that are turning to this, a lot of them are coming from bad socioeconomic situations. There's a lot of gang violence in the circles that they're running in. And there's a lot of just loneliness and lack of trust and not a healthy social atmosphere, much less an opportunity atmosphere. And this, again, is not the only group that is using it, but this is the one turning in specific in here specifically to the mental health services.
Yeah, I'm so glad this stuff wasn't available when I was that age, because I probably would have used it myself.
Yeah.
I'm serious, totally serious.
It's an easy, and the reasons there, I mean, you could completely see as a human being why they would. One, of course, they mention is that there isn't a lot of support among their peers. They can't talk about certain things, especially on one hand, maybe show vulnerability and weakness. On the other, if an issue is between someone in a dangerous cultural climate, there could be repercussions, and they have a lot of fear there. And then in the UK, of course, you have a kind of system where there's a long wait list for services.
Right.
And so it can be up to 2 years before some of these people are able to see anyone.
The wonders of socialized medicine.
Oh, yeah.
I saw the same kind of thing just today online. Wait times in Canada. Why anybody would think you should go to Canada for healthcare is just nuts.
Yeah.
Except for the idea that it's ostensibly free, which of course is a joke.
Yeah, it's very costly, and it takes like we're finding here, and beside that, it's the kind of service they're getting. They're mentioning that very judgmental and lack empathy. That's
an interesting thing for that because you would think that the super pro empathy people would be just all over this stuff in those institutions. But my experience is, having grown up on a ward of the state, is oftentimes people idealistically get involved in those lines of work and then it just get worn down over time and become very short-tempered and really cynical.
Yeah, it's just another case, and it's easy for it to roll over into that.
There's another side to all of this. Why would anybody think ChatGPT would give you good advice?
Right.
I mean, there have been a number of documented cases where ChatGPT advised and talked people into suicide, or at least some large language models. It reminds me of the old joke about the suicide hotline is answered by somebody with a Middle Eastern accent who gets all excited and says, "Can you drive a stick?"
Yeah. Well, the article at the end does try to say that there have been growing concerns about the dangers of chatbots, especially with children engaging them at length. And they gave the episode of the 16-year-old Adam Rain who took his life. We heard about that one, mentioned it, and how, of course, the people working on this stuff are trying to develop it to recognize and respond in healthier ways and direct them to services. I mean, this is, I guess they're trying to take responsibility here.
If you can get services.
I think it's...
I hear where you're going with this, Tom, and I agree, but people who are familiar with the technology or unfamiliar with the technology don't really realize just how hard that is to do.
Yes.
The way chatbots work is not the way people think that they do. So...
Yeah, well, and the fact of the matter is, with AI, we've talked about this before. You build safeguards into it, and AI finds ways around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
Yeah. There's nothing about it that should be a solution to this issue. But I think what we're dealing with is people who, because of a lot of other circumstances, it's an easy way to try to address something that is a real human need, and the kinds of institutions and societal contexts are failing them.
Right.
And so that this is where does technology run, or anything really runs into a vacuum or a place. And so what you hear over and over again is, here's one of the quotes: "I feel like it is definitely a friend," one of these young ladies said, adding that it was less intimidating, more private, less judgmental than her experience with a typical or conventional NHS and charity mental health support. So, but one of the things I think, this is one of the things that first questions I wanted to raise here is, on the one hand, I get that, but on the other hand, isn't that the kind of very thing we often kind of need when we ourselves have been in situations where we're stuck in a circle? Some of it, of course, we're not responsible for, but the way we respond to things are, and we happen to have developed a bunch of habits and dispositions that are hurting us ourselves, and we need someone to not always be telling us, "Oh, it's okay," and not judging what we're doing. In other words, there's no soul here, there's no conscience here, there is no love here, because there is no direction towards someone's overall good. And I think what we have here is we have so maybe practiced psychology in a way. And I guess to NHS's credit here, they weren't practicing it this way. But I think we've often made that model. So don't be judgmental, show empathy on everything, and basically affirm that, people in what they're deciding to do or not, that we have become soulless. We have become almost the equivalent of what this technology's mimicking. So I guess I start there. Friendship, soul care. I see what I think Milbank is onto, and just the care for souls that mental health should have, and the church definitely should have, is missing here. But these young people are thinking that's what they're getting.
Right. So I your point earlier about the fact that the best interests of the child are not in view, and of course, a teenager doesn't know oftentimes what's in their best interests, or
That's right.
maybe they don't have the inner strength to accept what's in their own best interests, and they're looking for someone to tell them that what they want to do is okay. And
Yes.
That's been the problem forever.
Yes,
with teenagers, right?
Yeah.
And when I look at this, I think, I've had my own bouts of depression, and I never talked to anybody about them. When I was in college, I could have done that because of shame.
Yeah.
And the problem is I could see myself easily going to a chatbot because there's nobody really there.
Well, that's one of the things, yeah.
But it wouldn't have solved the problem.
Yeah.
Because part of the problem had to do ultimately with connection.
Yeah.
And so, it creates an illusion of fixing the problem, or makes somebody feel like it's fixing the problem, but it really doesn't get at the fundamental thing that most of our, particularly now with the loneliness epidemic, a lot of our mental health issues really come from lack of human connection.
So, related to that, though, Glenn, I don't think, first of all, I agree completely. There's nobody home. There's nobody there.
Yeah.
But wishful thinking is powerful. And there are a lot of people out there who really do believe there's someone home. And they've developed arguments for it. And, if you've had an extended conversation with a chatbot, there is a seduction that occurs.
Yeah.
So you might start off as a doubter, but because it's such a pleasing experience to have the kind of interaction that a chatbot provides, that you kind of enter into a state of believing in spite of your best interest and in spite of your own judgment.
Which is why I tell people never get into a conversation with AI.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is just going to become escalated, of course, as the technology develops. And I think there is no way that mental health gurus are not going to tap into this as a resource of trying to balance out the fact that there's a huge demand in mental health crises, and technology now can supply some way of trying to alleviate some of the pressures that mental health figures are under. And I don't think that is a good way forward at all. And we can get to some of that a bit later. But
let's just jump into it real quick.
Yeah.
A large language model is one thing. You can have a small language model, which is limited to a certain body of, say, text. Yeah. So let's say you have somebody like Jordan Peterson. Yeah. I'm not saying he would ever do this, but just I'm using him as an example because he's a psychologist and everybody knows who he is. What if, all of the things that he's posted on, YouTube or written in books is all put into this small language model. And then you could actually have it mimic his voice. You could have somebody feel like they're having a real conversation with Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
We've seen this with pastors already. Yeah. The rate of adoption among pastors is really disconcerting.
Yeah.
In terms of using it for this kind of stuff.
Well, I work with Reflections Ministries, which is under Ken Boa. Ken has got a mind-boggling amount of material that he's generated over the last 50 years. And that is being put into a small language model database so that you can go. Now, he's not doing this to generate sermons or anything, but you can go there and ask questions, and it will find whatever it is Ken has said about this and bring it up for you.
Does it use his voice?
I'm not sure that they have actually. I know it has the potential to do that. I'm not sure they actually have done that yet.
I recommend you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's where, like you said, I mean, for somebody, I mean, it's not a lot different. It's just you go on the computer, you look something up. Sometimes we didn't have that advantage when I was young. That became something now you can look up. Now you can go to digital, archives and get books and research. So I imagine, it's just a step of advance in that direction to say, hey, look, I wrote 300 things and I want it accessible to somebody, and I don't want to spend 10 years making it accessible. Here's something that can do it in 20 minutes and they can have access. That's one thing. But like you said, when you get to a place where the line between the human being and the AI and chat box is blurred, but then on the other, this notion of dependency that you're seeing already with this young group, where one of the things you see here is they love the immediacy of it. And this is one of the this is where they've already been formed by technology to be oriented to it. This is a cultural and technological formation they've been readied for by the way in which the technological civilization is set up currently. So they're already readied. And in this notion that they don't, of course, nobody wants to wait 2 years to have someone to talk to. I get that. And, but the other side of it is this sense it's immediate, doesn't judge me, tells me what I want to hear, and it's very private. And again, I get the notion of privacy. But I think, this human element you mentioned a little earlier, Glenn, and I think Chris talked about it too, this notion you have to confront certain things that you're afraid of, shame or guilt or fear or something. I mean, this, I think, is one of the healthy aspects of proper soul care or even mental health, if you look at it as an extension of that. These things can be worked through in trusted environments. But maybe that's one of the things that's gone. Maybe the human care part of it doesn't seem, because of the burden of the system or for some other reason, maybe the cultural values that are now instantiated in mental health are such that you don't think they care, and maybe they don't.
Well, there's that. I think that's a great observation. But getting back to the failure to understand the technology itself, it's not as though this is going into the ether and it's not being recorded. Every dark secret you disclose is recorded.
Yeah.
And if we were to just let folks know, everything you say can be used against you someday, in some maybe innocuous way because they send you some product information through your email or whatever, but maybe in other ways that are much more consequential.
Yeah, that's territory, I think, that a lot of people haven't even, it hasn't even come up in their mind, and maybe they think it's not their immediate gang context, so they're not worried if it's someone going to sell them, send them something later down the road, but they should be. I mean, I think these kind of,
I can just think of it just like this way. Let's say you reveal that you have some temptation that you're struggling with, which could really be used to harm you if it were to get out.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. That's one of the things, of course, we as ministers are sworn not to divulge. If somebody shares something with us that's very sensitive, right? We're not supposed to, if a person has committed a crime, that's a different thing. But let's say we're just dealing with somebody that's struggling with something.
Yeah.
People need to think about this stuff.
Yeah. And I think that's why I was, I pivoted off John Milbank's point. I don't even know fully what he intended. I mean, I know from his own work that, theology has a public, and that why give over to social sciences what the queen of science should actually have a play, and why give over to other institutions what the church should actually be involved in. And if anything, the care of broken people who are scared and hurting, and the way in which again, ministry can't do everything, but these are territories where ministry could have insight and a say, could have more impact more closely with mental health fields. I mean, pastoral ministry and pastoral care is really where the whole mental health kind of grew out of in the West.
Sure.
And in a lot of those, the values that originally went into that did stamp the field for a while. Certain things
Right.
from scientism eventually kind of rid the world of that. The kind of detached,
Right.
therapist who just kind of looks at you the whole time while you talk, and then
The Freudian thing. Well,
Yeah.
it's worth noting that we used to talk about pastors being involved in care or cure of souls.
Right.
The root word of psychology literally means the study of the soul.
Yep.
We've subcontracted that out.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think that this is one of the things I'm itching around for, is the way in which the truly humane and these truly soulish dimensions on the surface look like AI is going to be much better than a human, alternative. And I think that that's where a deception is sitting, a fundamental deception. And I understand the temptation here. It's 24/7 available immediately. It isn't going to do all the things you don't want it to do, judge you, do all these, things. But these very human things that a real human can do and give, however imperfectly, are the kinds of things that we really need, as limited as they are. And I think this is where this is why, think about it. Why does think of it theologically. Why does God take a very imperfect human being to lead a flock spiritually, right? All right. Didn't give a perfect AI, although some churches are moving in that direction where there won't be long before you save money in the church by just buying a computer rather than paying the salary.
Think about all the money you could save on paying your pastor.
That's right. And
he's better looking. He actually doesn't say all the time when he's preaching.
Yeah, just think of all the things that you don't have to deal with. But I think it's the things that you have to deal with, the things that we're trying to perfect here, but we're trying to perfect them the wrong way. And I think this is part of I don't know if it's a duplicity. There's something here that is disguising itself and distorting something, and we're already in this next generation all in. And I think
I just read something in Spectator World, which is the oldest magazine, I think, in continuous publication. But I have a couple of friends who write for it, and there was an article about Aldous Huxley in it, and in that article, it noted that Huxley. Basically, the core conviction that Huxley had about technology is that the more we avail ourselves of it, the more we enslave ourselves to it. And that's kind of at the heart of Brave New World. That's really what Brave New World's about.
Yeah.
So the idea that technology is essentially liberating is a kind of bait and switch. It liberates you from certain things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you grow dependent upon it in the process. And he's not thinking about just computer technology, because it didn't even really exist in the time he wrote that. He was thinking about the processes, the industrial economy, all that kind of stuff that we kind of think of as the good old days of the analog.
Yeah.
That's what Paul Kingsnorth talks about.
Yeah. Well, again, the amount of changes that happen with small, even incremental technological advances is incredible. Yeah. And now we're talking radical leaps. But here's one of the responses from one of the youth and violence and mental health researchers in London to this. She quotes, "To have this tool that could tell you technically anything, it's almost like a fairy tale. Listen to this language. You've got this magic book that can solve all your problems, and that sounds incredible." But she's worried, of course, of lack of regulation. again, there's no soul
Sure.
there. There's no
Right.
conscience there. And the conscience issue, I think, is a big deal. And that's where the need for regulation. But again, who's doing the regulating?
Right.
And can this stuff be regulated by the nature of the technology in a way that
Well, and there's a huge difference too between, say, the regulations that guide and control a bureaucracy and the self-regulation that occurs when you've got a person who's hopefully wise and giving the kind of counsel that people need. Probably the woman who made that statement is thinking bureaucracy. When I hear regulation, I think self-regulation, self-mastery, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and this gets to things like that, the kinds of social philosophies that are going to have to be at play in culture in order to both address the fact that this stuff's not going away, but on the other hand, it's going to go in directions that are not just destructive and harmful or enslaving, but I think the very humanness of the human is at stake here.
Yes.
Not just the technology replacing humans, but the humans almost functioning more. It's like the idol, right? You become more like the idol,
right?
In the ways in which you're already seeing it here, where these young people they're getting a reflection of themselves in this technology, but that's because their depth is already not cultivated and developed yet anyway. And so this machine looks just like me, a machine. And there is, so this gets to a few key things. One, I think in this situation, and again, we have our own in the US, our problems, or in North America, but in this situation, there tends to be a lot more minorities that are driven to it than the kind of white kids from UK. And I think there's a host of reasons, but the socioeconomic reasons, especially with immigration and the kind of lack of assimilation, has probably kept a lot of the young kids in those families and stuff in lower socioeconomic areas, less opportunity. But on the flip side, they don't feel like they're a part. So they do get attracted to friendships that are unhealthy.
Well, and also the chatbots have a way of actually mimicking your language and even your accent.
Yes.
So you feel like you're actually interacting with somebody who's of your own socioeconomic background.
Yeah.
Cultural background.
Yeah, you have it. As they said, I feel like I have a trusted friend. That language itself there. So one of the things I think is, I'm thinking about this stuff is we've created conditions for a whole host of issues, whether it's immigrate, it's a whole lot of things. The uprooting of our own Christian roots in Europe and the U.S., and then the kind of modernistic models of Enlightenment government that has really pushed into radical areas notions of freedom and autonomy on the one side, but then this kind of equity. And it's a huge cocktail that creates a mess to which, when you have technology jump in the picture, it isn't making it better.
Right.
And so what you have is what happens to, how can, his point here, how can the church, right, or much less anyone, but the church, for example, what can the church contribute to?
Well, let me say,
not the technology, but to the issue with young people turning to technology.
Can I actually make one observation before we go there?
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to the old sci-fi things. Next Generation Star Trek, which isn't really that old, but what do you have there? You have AI systems like Data, who is becoming functionally a person during the course of it. But they're not doing what you're doing with Data is actually building mental health into him.
Yes.
The person who is the counselor is a human being.
Yeah.
They didn't even consider the possibility that you could have AI doing mental health stuff.
Right.
And yet now that here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. In those days, the only thing they were concerned about was Hal. And he kind of sounded like a psychologist. I'm sorry, right, Dave. I can't do that. But anyway,
actually, if you saw 2010, I never read the book, but in 2010, They actually had somebody who was a psychologist trying to understand what Hal was doing and why.
Okay. Psychoanalysis on Hal. Back to the point you just brought up, Tom. The last thing I think we need is a study committee.
Yeah.
I hope anyway that what Milbank is getting at is, folks on the ground in churches and parishes actually connecting with people, and not some bureaucratic non-solution where there's just a bunch of pontificating about AI.
Yeah, and I think to his credit, with his emphasis on the local parish, I have a feeling that's what he has in mind. But you've worked in, and similar to where I teach, we're dealing with inner city churches where it's not as easy as the kind of small parish church in a nice stretch of terrain that's scenic and lovely families all around. We're talking drugs. We're talking broken families. We're talking, I pull in the parking lot to teach theology and it smells like, a cannabis warehouse.
Right.
And so we're dealing with situations of young people growing up in these environments that are not just stressful and dysfunctional, but the kinds of resources out there are not doing it.
Tom, I think you need to specify that was not Gordon Conwell.
Maybe it was.
I'm not going to say where it was, but the Boston campus.
Yeah, the Boston campus used to be down at Jamaica Plain. I don't know if
it's in Roxbury. Yes, it's
there.
You know where it is.
Okay, so maybe I made the wrong assumption. I don't know.
I'm talking not the Hamilton. I'm talking the Cume campus, which I love the people and I love the campus, but the parking lot borders on some neighborhoods that will admit ministry and outreach is something we focus on in those areas. But the challenges are difficult and different. But I think one of these things I think one of the big things is this notion of connecting people.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the problem in sort of practical terms is they're leaving the church. What is our connecting point to the people who are unchurched?
Yeah.
How do we, that it seems to me is the obvious hurdle here.
Yeah. Well, and again,
one of the obvious hurdles here.
And I know a lot of churches, especially in that area and here, that are involved in various forms of outreach. I know people that do wonderful ministry at a local, a shelter where they go in and bring food, delicious meal, and then they sit and meet with the people and those families. And there are kids living in shelters with their family who've lost everything and in very challenging circumstances. And they begin these connecting points. But it isn't easy to build community. It's one thing to connect. It is very difficult to build community. And I think that's one of the challenges we face as Christians trying to.
And oftentimes, even those kids already have developed some very challenging antisocial behavior that makes it hard to help them, to guide them, because you're not there 24/7. And even if you were to bring them into your homes, it would take years for them to almost detoxify and be at a place where they've got enough trust. Because just think about all the people they've been surrounded by since birth have been untrustworthy, and have harmed them in different ways. So it really takes you got to be a saint, in terms of your ability to put up with stuff and not see progress if you're going to engage in that kind of ministry long term.
Yeah, it is challenging. Very challenging. It looks very different than ministry that's done elsewhere. But I do think the cry and need is very deep in some of these places, and I do think that desperation will have kids turning to this stuff without much reservation. And so just saying don't do that, it's not good for you, isn't going to work. It requires a lot more.
Well, this brings up something that we've been struggling with, or at least I have a little bit, and that's the role of regulation and all this stuff from a governmental standpoint.
Yeah.
So I mentioned in the last show that I have a measure of sympathy for Peter Thiel's worries concerning government regulation when it comes to technology.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not saying there's no place for some just common sense stuff.
Yeah.
But the problem, of course, again, is just like with online pornography, it's all kind of an honor system. And if you have no honor,
Yeah.
and you're just trying to get around stuff, you can get at anything you want.
Yeah.
Even in
Yeah.
places where all kinds of things have been established to prevent you from doing that.
Yeah. Well, that's it. And you're back to people that when it comes down to it, they're either going to give in to the vices that are there, or they're going to work towards virtue and kind of draw limitations or cut it off. But I think maybe in informative environments in which we can form people, let's put it that way, where we can educate, school systems where we or homeschool more now, but I'm just talking. Let's talk where I'm ministry is happening in the inner city, where most of these families can't do homeschooling, right?
Yeah, so, you wouldn't want many of them to try.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, some of that. Yeah, the kind of schooling they're getting at home is not great pedagogy.
But right. when mom reads at a second grade level,
yeah, it's true. It's very true, and it's tough. And education isn't prioritized, and then a lot of the schools there aren't prioritizing it either. They're managing. And they're very, they have to be very lax in terms of attendance and things like this, because there's just huge issues ahead of us. So in an ideal world, we could say, look, we could get a curriculum that's formative, and into that, from the ground up, begin the processes of moral formation that does help us with, as best as we can, develop the virtues that allow us to navigate these kinds of technologies. But we are nowhere near the first step, because we're dealing with so many other issues, and I don't even think the kind of curriculum, because of those other kind of issues, would be able to do what we want it to do. It is
and oftentimes the curricula is only helpful insofar as the person who's using it has had a healthy social environment to begin with.
Yeah.
It's not, curricula is no substitute for,
that's right,
the kind of healthy home environment that it lends itself to academic achievement.
That's right. And even the home environments need the communal environments, whether it's church or others, to also enact it too, because you can have, like we all know, the one family who did it all right, the kid meets someone outside of that, next thing you know, they're
Yep.
running with the devil, as they say.
Right.
Yeah, and so the issues here are just massive. But I think it's important to reflect upon the fact that you do have real problems that are driving these young peoples in this direction, and the church isn't irrelevant. But discovering the places at which the church can, whether it's community building, a certain kind of mission and investment in people, and I think enacting community in fuller ways that makes friendship and healthy environments for people to heal and find a haven that mental health professionals aren't giving, and technology is a substitute for. I think there is a step there. Again, it may be one person at a time, but that's all we've ever really done, right?
Yeah. Well, I think about my own situation, having been a ward of the state and been in a housing project, and cared for by doctors and psychologists who were social workers and wards, sort of instruments of the state. The thing that was most helpful to me as a teenager was a little church in Western Pennsylvania made up of just kind of salt of the earth people who didn't take an interest in me because I was a manila folder case. In other words, you know what I'm getting at with like psychologists and social workers. But just because I was a kid, and there was just an ongoing sense of being a part of things, not because I was a case, but because I was just a part of a community. That was very different than my sort of life as ward of the state. I would come home to a basically comatose mother who was drugged out of her mind, and in a neighborhood where there was just nothing in terms of healthy friendship that was available. I had to, literally get out of the neighborhood to be with people that were going to be good for me. And the scale of things, fortunately, was small enough that was feasible for a kid who just its only means of transportation was walking. I didn't learn to drive until I was 23, and the reason was we had no car. And I learned, but anyway. So what we're talking about here is something I'm intimately familiar with in terms of the conditions that a lot of these kids are dealing with. And I had the good fortune of the first, say, 5 or 6 years of my life having a fairly stable home environment. A lot of these kids that didn't even have that. If I didn't have that, I'm not sure where I'd be today.
Well, and I think it is that it's the side you mentioned, that church, and similar. My dad came from a family. His dad left when he was young, and his mom, my grandmother, wrestled with mental health issues. So sometimes he'd go be with dad, sometimes he wouldn't. Then she got remarried, and stepdad was an alcoholic. Well, they had a car, but my dad was driving it at 8 years old, so that his dad, stepdad, could drink. So my dad ended up in law issues, legal problems, and in and out of jail, basically, as a teenager. Finally, two Christian men had a business that hired him, and during his time there, they only didn't turn him away because of his past or his housing context, but they gave him a job and they gave him a chance. They would play ministers doing sermons on the radio during the day. And one day, my dad just hears the gospel.
Yeah,
he's in the motor shop on his knees accepting Christ, and it was the church through these men who had the integrity to give him a chance and point him in the direction.
Yeah, that's huge that they gave him a job. That kind of thing is so important, and there's no substitute for that. There's no just give them more counseling or more happy talk. You need to make those. You need to take a risk on a kid sometimes like that. For it to really, for a real change to take place.
And so he connects a real conversion, real church community, ends up being drafted during Vietnam, has military God used the military, create self-discipline, became one of the hardest working men and best fathers one could have in the world. And it was, I think, John Milbank in a better light, I think that is something.
Yeah. If Milbank means that, I'm all for it.
Yeah, if that's something that church can, that's the church being the church. It's finding these lost souls, and where you can, when you can, even with risk, being able to invest in a way that may change the world. It has definitely changed the world for me. And I don't even think there would be a me for that matter. But I mean, I think these things are real and they touch home. And I think that these are places where friendship happened, where modeling happened, where risk was taken. And if there wasn't this kind of Christian character of people placed in these situations, I think, had this tech been around then, this would have been where they looked for some kind of hope or help. And it will fail them.
Yeah. Well, another feature to this, too, is sort of the misunderstood kid who maybe finds himself in an environment where maybe his interests have no support. In the sense that, just think about, your own musical interests, Tom or Glenn. I was in an environment where, it was a blue collar, when I was a teenager anyway, kind of a blue collar, kind of low brow kind of environment. And I was a curious kid and had an interest in visual arts. And really got bit by the Tolkien bug and all that kind of stuff. And there was really nobody around, at least in those days, who had any sympathy for any of that.
Yeah.
And I could imagine if I were, if I found myself in a situation like that today, and this, virtual friend was available to talk to about the things that interested me, I would have availed myself of it because there was nobody else to talk to. You'd bring up stuff and people would just dismiss it or sneer or even laugh. But, so there are things like that we're not talking about mental health stuff, but still there would have been the temptation to develop an unhealthy emotional connection to something that isn't even real.
Yeah. Well, that is the other side. The emotional connection that's there is developing, and with something again that has no real emotional connection back. And are we such as human beings that we can be mimicked so thinly? And maybe we are right now. Maybe that's the sobering fact, is that we humans have become so shallow to each other that a computer is the preference.
Right.
Well, and you can connect that in with pornography, where it's shallow in what intimacy means, and everything surrounding that. I have to admit, when I heard what Milbank said, I thought, oh no, he's going to be pushing for pastors as counselors again. Right. But if which I mean, there's a role for pastoral counseling. That's one of the things that pastoring is about.
Yeah.
But for most mental health issues, I don't think that pastors are actually equipped to deal with that. But if he's talking about these kinds of human connections, that we've been talking about here, I think what he's saying is, makes sense. That's what the church should be doing.
Yeah. Right. And sadly, the Church of England isn't in a place where it has much to offer in that regard. Sadly, not every church, obviously, but a lot of them have went down to become nothing more than mouthpieces of current ideologies and current woke ways of relating to people, which is they're in the attempt to think that that's a way of connecting with a diverse environment. It's producing the same exact kind of judgmentalism and shallowness these kids are rejecting and going to technology for. And they won't, and there is no hopeful vision for these young people. And this is something I think that the church, of all people,
unless you pretend you've got some kind of sexual problem, and suddenly you're like somebody that everybody wants to connect with. But I mean, the institutions that we've tried to encourage people to connect with when their families aren't healthy, have actually gone a long way toward making fewer healthy families, and there's a kind of really weird dynamic to all of this stuff. So I'm with Glenn. I mean, I when I heard what you said, what you quoted Milbank as saying, my mind went to the same place. That's not what we need. What was in my mind.
Yeah, but again, I don't fully know what he does mean, but I do know enough about the theological emphasis and the public emphasis that we've often handed these things over to places that don't have what the church should have to be able to contribute to it. And I think it's there that the question becomes, but have we lost that in a lot of these churches? I think we have.
So to kind of take this a little further, I think that particularly when you're dealing with really challenging people, there's only so much, a couple of guys who have an auto shop can do.
Yeah.
There's only so much, there really is sometimes a need for an institution that you can consign the hopeless to.
Yeah.
That, it's the last resort because the person just has not responded to the help that's been provided before that. It's like I wrote an article one time for the Boston Herald, and basically my point was that in a healthy community, by the time a kid gets to the police, he's already been confronted maybe half a dozen times by other people, neighbors,
Yeah.
parents, teachers.
Yeah.
And it's only after all those have failed to change the behavior that the kid finds himself arrested.
Yeah.
Now, there's hardly any of that in some kids' lives, in
Yeah.
terms of barriers that you have to kind of get through to get to the cop.
Yeah.
I'm just really struck by the connection I made with what you just said, Chris, was West Side Story,
Yeah.
the song Sergeant Krupke.
Right.
where the kids know how to game the system, no matter who you send it to.
Yeah.
The cop picks them up, you send them to the judge sends them to a social worker, the social worker sends them whatever.
Yeah.
And the kids game the system the entire way.
Oh, I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen
Great
it.
song if you guys don't know it out there in Podcast land. Worth checking out.
Yeah, and it's about
kindly Sergeant Krupke, West Side Story.
Yeah, it's about gang violence in the 50s and 60s, early 60s. I think it's 50s when it came out. Yeah.
Well, we've mentioned a lot, because the article mentioned a lot, the kind of, the broken home, the groups that are first and foremost attracted. But I do think there is a lot with young people already of alienation, no matter what socioeconomic situation, even some otherwise healthy families.
Yeah.
There is especially a lot among their peer groups. I mean, I know up here the local high school canceled homecoming. There wasn't enough interest.
Really? Wow.
Yes. Canceled. I mean,
Wow.
So here is an event that you used to be able to at least connect with your friends, and I'm sure their kids would get into a few things, but a little bit of the adventure of that age group. But on the hand, there's nothing there to replace it. So what?
That's
They're going to go online and game, or what are they going to do?
So that's a startling thing, because no one ever associated homecoming with necessarily a wholesome evening.
Exactly.
At least in the course of my life.
So
the kids today don't even have enough, connection with real life to be unwholesome in a real way.
Yeah, that kind of adventurousness, that isn't always the best, but it's something you need.
Well, yeah, that's at least you can say that they asked a girl out. Something like that. Yeah, man,
it's boundary finding, and but they. I saw this. I was like, this was one of the, for some kids, this was like one of the things they look forward to socially.
Oh, yeah, highlight of the year.
Yeah, yep. And then, parents too, you'd think a lot of them would come back, go see their sports team from high school. And really, this is, and
are we talking West Hartford here?
Yes.
Oh, man.
Wealthy West Hartford.
Yeah. It's one of the wealthy, for folks out in Pugcast land, West Hartford is probably the wealthiest part of the Hartford area.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe Glastonbury would be the only other place that's close.
And they just, and again, I don't think, it would be curious around prom time what happens, but do they even want to have a date and a dinner?
Wow. If you were to ask me to describe what prom night in West Hartford would be, I would say a lot of girls dressing up like they wanted to be on Housewives of Beverly Hills or something.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys, basically on the make, listening to pickup artist lines and stuff like that to prepare for the event. Yeah. And they couldn't even pull that off. Wow.
Yeah, it is. And so, but that's, I think, another thread here is that, friendship is at an all-time low. They do have friends. I have a teenager who has friends at the different schools around. They do have friendships, and they have common kind of interests, kind of like we did when we were there, but they do not have the friend kind of world that, we would have known that these friends know this group, and, this guy and girl wants to get to know each other. Those environments are not the same. And technology has, and restructuring of family home lives. These things have played their part, but it is a different vibe, and I don't see it as a good. I imagine the losses there are great.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the things I've been thinking a lot about in terms of our inability, older folks like us,
Yeah.
to understand where kids are coming from,
Yeah.
because so many of the things we take for granted don't exist anymore.
That's right.
They're just gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's it's something where you kind of even don't even know how to ask questions, because
right.
we don't have a kind of imagination to get what's going on there, and it is and there's a kind of just there's no interest in really people wanting to get to know each other.
Yeah. Well, why when you can have Chat GPT be your best friend?
That's right. And you'd rather have 6,000 likes from people you've never met.
Right.
And I get, again, there's things that need to be looked at here. I mean, as Christians, because this affects, family lives, and this affects, the souls of parishioners and society, large scale. And we have a responsibility to kind of, be salt and light and find pathways, portals for people to not get stuck in these places. And that's why I kind of brought it up. I thought it was a good article in that way, get you thinking through, the significance of friendship and how do we begin the cultivation of it.
Well, but one of the things that this does is, I think, challenge me to think how to reconcile what I think might be almost impossible to reconcile. And one is boundaries, because the only way you're able to create healthy communities is with some boundaries, meaning you're either in the community or you're not. And if you're in the community, then there's certain things you can be expected to know, and things you do and you're not supposed to do, and stuff like that. And then a measure of openness to people in need.
Yeah.
And it seems like what has happened is because of this strong emphasis on always kind of being in a kind of evangelistic outreach mode, we don't permit the kind of healthy boundaries to develop that would make for environments where people can be safe, for one thing, but also grow up in environments where the kinds of friendships that we've been describing as being that have been lost can be developed.
Yeah.
And I've actually come across people who condemn that kind of boundary maintenance because it is detrimental to the outreach kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't just John Paul II who was talking about the fact that culture too needs re-evangelization.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing that I would like to visit again in another episode, and that is, for example, what we're doing here at my church is really unusual in the sense that I can only think of maybe 2 or 3 other situations in my, and it's not like I know everything, but 2 or 3 other situations that are somewhat similar to what we're doing here in Battleground. And we've got all kinds of things that are sort of atypical in terms of young marriages and lots of kids and business development and different things like that. But there's a very strong sense of the community that we have. I mean, we're still open, but not in the kind of goofy ways that some churches seem to be.
Yeah. Well, there is that when that's done well, that becomes one of those things. I mean, we're similar. We're not a huge church, but we're in a very working class area. But we have people in strong families, and there's a sense of being a part of something that you're cared for. And I mean, everyone who visits says the same thing, and I think that kind of thing used to be there more widely. It used to be there, and it isn't. So we become kind of a micro version of what should be there further with families and communities and things like that. And so we are kind of a light on a hill in these times. And I don't know, again, how, I'm always thinking about the differing ways we could spread that, not just again spreading the gospel, which is first and foremost, but also re-evangelizing what used to be Christian rooted culture that knew these things well, and they were good gifts to allow for people and families to have a better frame of reference than turning to tech.
I think that this brings up a problem in a lot of churches in that you don't actually have community within the church.
Right.
That it's an assemblage of people that come together on Sunday. Maybe there are some small groups in it and things like that, but there is no real sense of a cohesive community.
Yeah.
Which I think is I think it's an unbiblical way of going about doing church. Let's just put it that way.
Right. No, I agree with you.
Right.
I agree with you.
That's right. The communion. This is a communion and a fellowship. When you look at that language and you see how central it is, not only to our identity and relationship to God and each other, but to being a human. And then you realize that this is what is being taken away by the social visions that have replaced the Christian vision.
Yeah. If I can nerd out a little bit here, we talk about fellowship, and a lot of people know that the Greek word is koinonia, and they think they know what that means. If you look it up in Bauer, Arndt, and Gingrich, the main Greek lexicon for New Testament Greek, the first definition is it describes it as a favorite term for marriage in secular Greek as the most intimate possible relationship between people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when it talks about fellowship, it's something a lot more than a potluck.
Yeah.
Right. Well, let's call it a show with that thought.
Good way to end it. That's what we all need and are looking for.
A potluck? Oh, no.
I'll take that as well.
Right. Anyway, thanks for listening to this episode of the Theology Pugcast. Great to have you for the episode, and you made it all the way to the end. And if you'd like to support us, and that would be really appreciated, you can go to our Patreon page. There's a link in the show notes, and become a supporter. We could use the help to pay the bills. Anyway, thanks a lot, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Theology Pugcast is a ministry of Westminster Presbyterian Church in Battleground, Washington. The Theology Pugcast is produced and edited by Wiley Craft Productions of Nashville, Tennessee.